This is Dr. Tim Terlep from Terlep Chiropractic, inviting you to join us every Wednesday morning for 30 minutes to vitality. Each week, we'll be addressing topics that are ultimately important to your health and to mine. Topics about prevention of disease, expressing greater well-being, more mobility, and vitality overall. Join us every Wednesday morning for 30 minutes to vitality.
And look at there, it is Wednesday morning. It's your time for your 30 minutes of vitality, brought to you by Terlep Chiropractic. How do you spell Terlep? I'll tell you. Terlep. That's how you spell it, because you want to go online. You want to type that in the search bar, Terlep, and it'll bring you right to Terlep Chiropractic. Dr. Tim Terlep in our studios every Wednesday at this time, live to address your health concerns. From Terlep Chiropractic on Northcliff Boulevard, Spring Hill, we welcome Dr. Tim Terlep and your 30 minutes to vitality, which begins right now. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Tim Terlep here. Welcome to 30 Minutes of Vitality. And we say it each and every week, we are gifted to be vital, right? It's built within us, innately created to do that. We just get interference to it, right? We're either getting stuff in our lives that needs to go, or we're not getting stuff we need to add. And if we just remove interferences, we get vitality. It's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing. Thank you. It's better than good. It's great, to quote Tony the Tiger. Okay. I'm showing my age at that point, right?
Or my favorite movie, It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Thank you very much. Much better than Tony the Tiger reference. That's a good thing. So we're going to continue. We talked a little bit last week, actually a lot of it last week, about exercise and dementia and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we mentioned last week and got a couple of comments that people were surprised, and it really is, I guess, a little bit surprising to think that when it comes to dementia, memory loss, cognitive functionalities, and the progression of that strength training actually proves to be more beneficial for that than does aerobic training. But remember, we talked about the three components of fitness that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to when we look at this pillar of our health, one of those 5 pillars, right? And we look at fitness and exercise. There's 3 things. One is aerobic capacity, the other is strength, and the other is flexibility, right? So those are 3 components of fitness. And as we joke about a lot, we get the muscle guys who, if you ask them to run half a mile down the road, they can't get there. Tie your shoes. They can't bend over to tie their shoes. They got to sit down and tie their shoes. Or you get the runners who actually have very little strength, but wonderful, amazing endurance, right? And again, maybe not so much flexibility other than their warm-up stretches before they start to run, right? So it's the combination of those things. It's putting that all together that gives us real fitness. So we looked at dementia, we looked at progression, we talked about those people, that SMART study out of Australia, and we looked at a couple of different things. We found out that strength training was actually helping us more, resistance training, than for cognitive decline than did aerobic fitness. Interestingly enough, this week we're just going to touch on a little bit, because a lot of people will think, again, we hear through the news, just like we do with Alzheimer's and so many things, we hear about with cancer. We hear about all the genetic predilections and the genes that are associated with this cancer and that cancer, and all the different things that we've got are there, no question. But again, we've talked about how lifestyle and the way that we eat, the way that we exercise, the way that we rest, the sunshine we get, the neurologic tone components of the control of our bodies really markedly affect that outcome and the expression of those genes. So when we look at exercise again, so we talked a little bit about memory and cognition. Well, let's look a little bit about cancer care and prevention of cancer. If I exercise, does it do anything at all to help me prevent the development of a cancer in me, or in Mary, or in Steve?
You obviously, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. You knew where I was going,
right? Of course.
Right? You saw where it was going. Yep. It absolutely is the case. As a matter of fact, it's not just yes, it's heck yes.
All right.
Right? It really, really does. And that kind of confounds some people. Mm-hmm. Right? We'll go, really? Right. I thought it was more, genetics, right? And again, that is it. But then tell me why we see that people don't exercise as much get more cancer. People who actually are overweight get more cancer. Type 2 diabetics get more cancer. People who actually don't get enough sleep, higher risk of cancer. That there's so many things that are lifestyle related that we show are correlated with the onset of cancer. Mm-hmm. Regardless, because when they do these studies, sometimes lately they're doing it, but usually these studies don't look for genetic markers when they're doing the study. So people could have them, not have them, right? And we see these improvements overall. So what's kind of interesting when it comes to exercise, and again, remember the three components, right? Aerobic fitness, strength, and flexibility. So again, because we hear, and I even talked a little bit about, the American College of Physical Medicine Specialists, right? Talking about with aerobic fitness, that 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week, right? Or 75 minutes of more active aerobic exercise per week. What we didn't mention under that is part 2 of that recommendation was resistance training. Right? Now, sometimes when people think of resistance training, they'll start to think, well, I have to go to the gym then because I have to be able to get on the circuit machines, the Cybex, the whatever, all the life fitness stuff, right? All the equipment. No. Right? They'll go, well, I have to be there so I can get on the dumbbells and the free weights and I can do all that kind of stuff. Not at all. Right? Can I do resistance training in my living room?
I believe you could.
I believe I can, right? So could I do simple planks in my living room?
Yeah.
Where I get on my tummy and I put both my elbows down and I come up and I just hold. And is that resistance? Yeah, yes, against my body weight, right? Push-ups, is that resistance training? Absolutely is, right? I mean, there's so many different things that qualify as resistance training that we don't need to do that. If I just stop by Dick's Sporting Goods or any place and picked up some stretchy bands, whether I get the little tubey ones with the little grips on them in the end, or I just get the TheraBands that are the little, the yellow, red, orange, black bands that are just stretchy with different levels of resistance. Wait, there's that word. Could I just use that tied against the doorknob at my house? Absolutely. I mean, I don't need to have a gym to do simple, inexpensive, really effective resistance training. So why am I mentioning this as well? Because again, the evidence is showing us, which is really remarkable, right? Even to me, as we look through it, that resistance training, again, just like with cognition, Alzheimer's, and cognitive functionality, we actually see that resistance training has actually a greater effect on cancer presentation than does aerobic fitness.
So lifting dumbbells, would that be?
Yeah, that's absolutely resistance training. Okay. So if I just had, my wife actually will use, we have some free little dummy bell things at the house, right? Does she use, 3 pound, 5 pounds, 7 pounds? Absolutely. Okay. I'm usually at the 8, 10, 12, 15 pounds, right? When we start to do repetitions and doing that kind of stuff, it's resistance. Okay. And as you get stronger, can you go to a higher weight? Oh, yeah. That's called progressive resistance training, right? So I get a little stronger and I raise my weight just a little bit. Maybe I'm still keeping it, 8 or 10 repetitions per set, right? And that's how I progress on that resistance training. But studies are actually showing, matter of fact, it was interesting because that SMART study that we talked about for resistance training relative to cognition and Alzheimer's presentation, right? One of the things that we saw with that one that was done at the University of Sydney in Australia, they must really like resistance training there because there's another huge study that followed 80,000 people for a long period of time looking at their fitness levels. And it not only just did a baseline, it actually then followed them over time and they do a follow-up physical examination and strength reassessments, etc. And again, what they found was the people who had the greatest strength in that one component, and we have strength as one of the 3 parts of fitness, right? Who had the greatest strength had the least amount of cancer presentation. Now, it wasn't just a little, you go, okay, so what was it, like a 7% reduction, a 5% reduction, an 11% reduction? No, the people in the highest group actually had a 31% reduction in cancer presentation. So wait a minute, just from, again, I say this a lot. I sound like a broken record, right? Because it'll be like, wait, from this one simple thing, I can reduce my cancer risk by a third? Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Right? By a third, right? Incredible. So these folks at the University of Sydney, they must be like really into it because they keep studying. There's lots of stuff about resistance training.
To figure out how they do it. Yeah.
Coming out of these Aussies, right? Yeah. So they do that between hitting the bobby, right? So it's an amazing thing to see. There was another study that specifically was looking at men, studied about 10,000 men for about 15 years, did the same kind of stuff. Went through and looked at the baseline strength and all that kind of stuff, right? And then they'd follow up with exams and retest the strength over the course of the period of time. And this one actually found nearly a 40% reduction in cancer in the men who had the strongest levels and presentations over the course of the study. from resistance, from
now,
strength.
how did they test these guys? I mean, was it whoever could bench press the most or what?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Really?
I mean, yeah,
Okay,
there's
so
grip
just
tests,
strength,
there's strength,
yeah.
right? And interestingly enough, as we mentioned, it was the same thing that we mentioned with cognition and dementia, right? The lower extremities. So your quadriceps, your hands, your thighs, front and back, right? That and then your buns and that lower part of us actually, when that's the strongest, has the most significant effect. Right. So for cosmetic reasons, men want to get the chest thing and they want to get the bicep thing and but really what has the greatest effect on our health and well-being is the greatest amount of strength in our buns and our legs.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. And you look at some, like, say, football players that have had, brain injuries and have had mental issues as they got out of football or whatever throughout the years as they got older and progressive. But I think that's mainly from maybe traumatic injury from being hit or something in the field. That's
kind of a little different thing.
Okay.
Because those guys typically are fairly fit,
right?
To be sure,
exactly.
Right? Did I say fairly fit?
Fairly well, yeah.
Some of them are unbelievably fit, right? Fairly, where'd that come from? Right. But it's that repetitive hit. It's sometimes called a traumatic brain injury and they get bonked and they get bonked and they get bonked and they get bonked. And that same thing with a boxer. I mean, a boxer actually ends up getting that hit in the head, hit in the head, and ends up with other neurodegenerative diseases, including loss of thought and memory, or Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative problems from repetitive hits to the head. Same thing with football players.
And I think you hear more about that in the news because of the fact that there are names, that they're in sports.
Yeah.
So you hear more about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So a little bit, that's actually, again, that's their lifestyle thing because they're getting hit repetitively, right? But this is actually for you and I.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't about a pro athlete or you and I are going to be professional anything.
But we've got kids who are playing football today or basketball and working out in the gyms, and getting all big and muscular.
Again, that's going to be limited. 99% of those kids are not going on to professional athletics for another 10 or 20 years.
Okay, cool.
Not going to happen. Right? But for you and I, and those of us who aren't doing that, it's this strength and resistance. The stronger we are, the less likely we are to get cancer.
Works for me.
Right. Now, combining that with aerobic, right? But that's why it's all three of those components. Does it ratchet it up? Because then there are other studies that will look at the reduction that comes from being aerobically fit, right? So fantastic. And that actually lowers it even more. So when people are actually doing all three components, I've got some aerobic fitness, I've got some strength fitness and flexibility, put that all together. And what do you get? You get significant reduction in your risk of cancer and just about everything else. I don't know if you remember, we were talking specifically about cardiac stuff. I don't know when it was, a year and a half ago. And there was one study that was looking at men who actually with push-ups, all they were looking at was push-ups.
Right.
We just specifically mentioned push-ups are a form of resistance exercise, right? And the guys who could actually do, and I believe the number was 40 push-ups within 80 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? If they could do it at the beginning of the study, they checked them again every couple of years. And after 10 years, the guys who could still do 40 push-ups in 80 seconds had a 96% less likelihood of having a heart problem during the course of the decade of that study.
That's right. I remember you mentioning that.
Right?
Yeah.
From simple push-ups. What? Crazy stuff.
Maybe simple for you.
So, right. Well, we always
start somewhere.
Absolutely, right? And again, when we look at being sedentary as well, there's study after study now. I'm not a huge proponent of this expression. I shouldn't even say it on the air, right? But someone go, well, sitting is the new smoking, right? Have you heard this? Sitting is the new smoking. Okay, good, great. So it's politically cute expression, right? But again, there's like lots of studies. I take it just to say being sedentary, right? I don't want to bit in that umbrella and be politically correct and
does a body good
and jump on the bandwagon, right? Yeah. Not at all. But it is indicative of the fact that being sedentary, right, and not being active. We have study after study that shows that increased sitting does actually increase every type of disease. You name it. Now, some people, the studies then look and go, well, what is it exactly? Why are we actually enjoying this significant reduction with resistance training? What's that about? So I use resistance training, I get stronger, and I actually enjoy reduced risk of cancer. And the really cool part is there was one of the specific studies was looking at 26 different cancers, and 13 of them showed that level of a significant reduction.
Wow.
Right? Isn't that amazing? I just love that. And they go say, well, what is it that's doing it? And believe it or not, no one has, there's not, the follow-up studies are underway, of course, right? But no one has a specific answer. But the real good postulate, and the number one answer that comes from all of these studies, the first thing they look at is reduced inflammation, right? How many times have we talked on the air how inflammation is actually the number one cause of the onset of, the fancy word is pathogenesis of these diseases, the beginning of the progression of those problems is through inflammation. And when you actually do resistance training and have that progressive resistance and the increased strength, our inflammation in our bodies generally, it just goes down. So that's the number one thing is inflammation. You look at all this, inflammation, reduced inflammation, right? Wow. One more time, right? When we look at that. The other thing is actually controlling of hormones, right? So the number one that we're looking at there too is insulin. Now, a lot of people don't think of insulin as a hormone, but it is, right? And we get this insulin resistance when we are less strong, when we are less fit. Insulin levels go up to try and drive glucose into our cells. Our cells get a little bit more resistant to glucose, and it takes a little bit elevated level of insulin to drive the same amount of glucose into the cell so that we're metabolically stable and solid. Interesting, right? So it actually decreases insulin. Now, sometimes you have people will actually say, oh, it helps to stabilize blood sugar, but the blood sugar is not what's actually doing it. So are diabetics, type 2 diabetics, do they tend to actually have increased levels of cancer risk? The answer is yes.
Okay.
And the supposition at this juncture is that it's the insulin levels that are actually leading to that. So when we have increased strength due to this, we actually have more stable insulin presentations as well. Other sex hormones, number 3, are also improved. So when we see it happening with breast cancer victims, right? Endometrial cancer, cervical cancers, ovarians, right? Those are all oftentimes sex hormone related cancers. Right. So do we actually see better modulation of estrogen and progesterone? Yes, we do. Right? Testosterone, absolutely. Right? We see that better stabilization and normalization. So those sex hormones will actually be more stable and less likely to do it. Do we see better weight control? Yes, because then the bigger we are, the more excess adipose we carry as well. Does it increase our insulin levels? Yep. Does it increase generalized inflammation? Yep. Does it elevate your blood sugar levels? Yep. It does all those things.
Now, what about colon, stomach, rectal cancer?
Yeah,
I mean, you would think that would be based on something, on eating your lifestyle.
Those are components. Remember, nothing is ever unifactorial.
True.
Right. So that's why in the 5 pillars of health, we look at nutrition being one of them. Right. Right. So just because I might have good resistance and strength, right? Does that mean that I'm not going to get cancer? Nope. Because I eat 4 steaks a day. Right, it's still going to create those problems in my colon and in my esophagus and possibly in my stomach and my duodenum and my pancreas. Absolutely can cause those things. So that's why we kind of put it together, right? It's kind of the recipe. That's why they're the 5
like
pillars.
The core 4,
Those are the 5 pillars that we need to make sure that we're addressing. None of them individually or by itself. Otherwise, I come on the air and go, guess what? There's one magic bullet to well-being. Here we go. One magic bullet. Wow, hallelujah. I got it too. That'd be great to say, but that's not the reality of health. That's not the reality of the innate expression of vitality that we get. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Right? So we want to make sure that we're seeing those things. It's amazing, the reduction in those hormones, the reduction in the inflammation, the reduction in insulin, the reduction in weight that the strength training actually induces that brings us forward. Now, what's interesting as well is now the latest research. If I said, oh my goodness, I bet even 20 years ago, I'm just shooting from the hip here. I don't have a specific literature reference for this one. But even 20 years ago, if I said, Uncle Harry has a cardiac problem, and we want Uncle Harry to exercise for his cardiac problem, right? 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they'd say, no, Uncle Harry has this, he needs to rest, right?
Yeah, right.
But in the last decade, to actually that would be actually looked at as anathema. No, Uncle Harry needs to move. If he's got a cardiac problem, matter of fact, after surgery, we want him moving as soon as we possibly can again to help him do better. Matter of fact, if Uncle Harry had been moving beforehand, Uncle Harry might not have had the cardiac problem to begin with. Right, so that's become standard knowledge when it comes to cardiac presentations. Right, it's gonna become, and it is starting to become with cancer care. So wait a minute. So if somebody already has cancer, will exercise do anything to facilitate them while they're under a regimen of care for that cancer,
Yes, sir.
can it help them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, we're seeing in some documentation in certain situations that people who actually get active while they're under care literally will double survival rates.
Even stuff with like the simple cold or flu. I mean, you want to keep active. You don't want to just be bedridden.
No, because again, a modulation of immune function, right? And so, again, they're trying to figure out, well, why does exercise really help our cancer care? Why does it make it better? Now, it'll do the great things like, does it decrease typically nausea that people get from that kind of intervention? It does. Does it increase strength? It does. Does it increase mentality and elevate depressive levels? It does. Does it increase sleeping capacities? It does. It does all those lifestyle things, but then it also helps to modulate the cancer care itself. And so they're looking at it again, and there's postulates about how exercise, because of its effect on immune function, will then increase the functionality of certain types of immune cells that actually then that augment the cancer care and help it become more effective by actually increasing immune functionality. Cool, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's I don't have my crystal ball. I'm not the great Karnak, for those of you who remember Johnny Carson, and the answer is, right? I don't have that, but it'll be probably standard conventional cancer care. Exercise is going to be part of it. I mean, there are even folks.
It's not yet.
No, not always. No, not at all. Okay, and family members will tend to go. Again, I'm going to pick on poor Uncle Harry, but poor Uncle Harry who has stomach cancer, right? And he's under care for that right now. And Uncle Harry needs to rest.
Right.
Uncle Harry needs to rest. No. Uncle Harry, get your butt off the couch. Don't be lying down. Get your butt outside. Let's start doing some exercise.
Cool.
No, again, I don't want him to become Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. I don't want him to become
The Rock.
The Rock. Right. We're not looking at that. But we need to move. We need to do stuff, and it will become in certain circles. It is. I mean, if we went down to Moffitt right now, I promise you, they've got certified exercise folks from the American College of Sports Medicine Physicians who've actually, they're certified programs for exercise for people under cancer care. I guarantee you they're on staff at Moffitt. Guarantee, right? But it's going to become that part that is actually conventional. It's going to be part of the program because the evidence is just mounting and mounting. So resistance training, can it actually help us to prevent it? Absolutely, no question, right? And if you've got it, can it even help you on the other side of that too? Yeah. Right. So would you want to get out and do what you can? 20 minutes, 30 minutes of walking 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. Do you want to do that resistance stuff? Yellow bands are the least resistive type of band when you're using those. So could somebody just at home grab yellow bands and, move their arms across their chest, get 2 yellow bands and put them above their head, up and down, put them against the door down low and actually, pulling the leg back this way and then turning around and pulling the leg forward. Right? There's so many simple ways that resistance can be done. So if somebody's under care, they can facilitate that significantly. And when people are on the other side, is the evidence also showing that it will significantly reduce the resurgence of any cancer? Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Right? Yep. So it's just amazing what movement can do. Remember when we joked 3 weeks ago when we started to talk about exercise, we said movement is life. It's what drives everything neurologically. It's what drives everything vascularly. It's what drives everything immunologically. Right? We have to move. A choice not to move is a choice to be ill, which is a strong statement and not fun to hear sometimes, especially if you're not moving. You go, well, that's nonsense. That guy's full of malarkey. Yep. Well, I'm sorry. I'm just pulling it out of the journals. I don't know what to tell you.
I want the couch potato recipe.
I like you know what? That would be a nice recipe. Although when you exercise, the way it makes you feel once you're doing it,
I know.
You just can't stop because it's so jazzing that it's like, I'm not going to. I got to carve out that time. I go on vacation. We have to carve out time to exercise because it's nice, fabulous actually to feel great, right? I don't care if I live another year or I live another 40 years. If I get to feel like this while I'm here, I'm good.
I want to live.
Right? Yeah. So movement, critical for everything. And we got some other stuff to talk about next week.
Okay, good. Dr. Tim Terlep, Terlep, that's your 30 Minutes to Vitality every Wednesday at this time only on this station. Dr. Terlep can be found online at Dr. Terlep. That's Dr. Terlep. Northcliffe Boulevard, Spring Hill, 352-666-2222. Make your next appointment with a Terlep Chiropractic. Until then, we'll see you next week, folks.
Not your heart to be troubled.